Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, and thanks for coming along to our session today about the B1 and B2 Assistant Statistician Recruitment Campaign that we have launched that closes next week. Just bear with me a second as I'm trying to share my screen up here so I can share my slides. There we go. I can see it now. It momentarily disappeared, which which would have been a bit unfortunate. So what we're going to be doing this afternoon is we've got an hour and a half in the calendar for this, but it'll probably be a little bit less than that depending on the number of questions that we've got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through. I'm going to start first of all by kind of talking about what it's like to be a statistician within Scottish Government. And we've got Ria with us along who will be able to kind of tell us what it's like from her experience. Ria is an assistant statistician in Scottish Government at the moment. So we'll pause at that point and we'll have an opportunity for questions about what it's like to work as a statistician. Then we'll go on to the second half of the presentation where we'll be explaining the application and assessment centre process. So that will be kind of all the details about what to expect if you apply for the role and if you're successful and go through to interview. So if you've got any questions on that, we'll come to that in the second half. So yeah, if you've got questions on the process, we'll deal with that later on. But if you've got questions about what it's like to work in government as a statistician, we'll do that first. Hopefully that all makes sense. So we'll start by start the slides. So what is it like to be a government statistician? So I suppose the question I'm asked all the time. So first of all, I should introduce myself properly. So I'm a senior statistician in heading up the office of the chief statistician. My role, amongst other things, is I'm responsible for statistician recruitment. The thing that I'm asked quite often is, what do statisticians actually do? Because I think people have maybe an idea that we kind of like work with numbers or that we're kind of involved in statistics. Not everyone fully understands what we're trying to do. So that's what I'm going to try and kind of cover in this first part of the presentation. The basic aim of what we're trying to do is producing what we call official statistics. And official statistics provide an accurate and up-to-date picture of what's going on in society today. So those statistics are then used by our policy colleagues and by government ministers to make decisions, to target government spending, but it provides useful information for everybody within Scotland to find out what's going on in society. So we work in what we call an outcomes-based government. And that means that the outcomes relate to essentially making Scotland a better place to live and improving well-being for its citizens. So underlying all of that, we need to be able to measure our outcomes. And that's where we come in as statisticians in order to kind of help with that process in terms of ensuring, creating statistics and ensuring that they're appropriately used. And as such, we work across a range of different policy fields. So you can see it on the slide there, everything from education to economy, health to housing, you name it. We work across all aspects of government. So the stats group within Scottish Government, there's more than 300 of us now. And we work within analytical teams. So we work alongside other analytical professions, such as economists and social researchers. And collectively, we work together in order to help kind of support the correct use of data and statistics in order to help drive policy and decision making. And we have statisticians that are based quite far and wide. So we've got statisticians within the main Scottish Government, but also some of our other public bodies and agencies. So one that you may have heard of is the National Records of Scotland. The NRS is responsible for the census collection. So that's the count of the population every 10 years. We've quite a lot of statisticians in NRS, and as I say, various other parts within SG. So I put some links. I will include links to these a little bit later on, but we've introduced some blog posts as to what it's like in the day in the life of an assistant statistician. So we've got 3 there, which gives that kind of breadth as to what our statisticians are actually doing. So we've got Anushka, for instance, was involved in the COVID statistics during the pandemic, which was definitely a very high profile and very fast paced example, I would say, of what we do as statisticians. We have Ross Waddell, who he worked as part of the Ukrainian resettlement response. So obviously that's been very, very pertinent and very relevant from the last kind of year or so. I got to briefly stop sharing and bring in Ria at this point. So, Ria, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to meet you. Just giving my camera and mic a few seconds to catch up. Can you hear me okay, Paul?
Yes. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, so as Paul and Steve said, I work as a B2 assistant statistician. I came in just at the start of January, so I've been here for about 11 months now. Before that, I was in the ONS and I worked as a research officer, which was similar, but not the same, definitely. I work in the quality analysis team in Scottish Government, which from its name, it sounds like we do exactly what it sounds like. We publish a lot of publications on different equality topics. For example, the Gender Equality Index, which is the publication that shows kind of the inequality between men and women on different aspects of life in Scotland. Another recent publication I did was on the time use in Scotland, which reflects how people spend their time differently depending on the different equality characteristics that they have. So it really is a variety of things that we publish. And as you would expect, as a statistician, my day-to-day is mainly involved with data analysis. So, I do a lot of data acquisition, whether that's from the source directly or it might be secondhand from another analyst. I do a lot of data analysis and communicate the data after that, whether that's in written reports or visually with graphs and charts and infographics, all sorts like that. Nothing out of the ordinary. I also try and make a lot of time for personal and career development in my day. So I volunteer to participate in different initiatives that might be across the Scottish Government or the wider UK government. I do a lot of, attend seminars and workshops on, different topics relating to working as a statistician or, upskilling my portfolio as a statistician, or even new things like just learning to code or, different coding languages, or even just career development things like, how to progress early in your career or how to be a better leader or a better manager, things like that anyone really does in their whatever their job is, which is great. The Scottish Government really gives you that kind of variety of topics that you can learn. As I said, we publish a lot of different outputs, a great variety. Most of them really use a lot of quantitative methods. So things like, techniques for data analysis or coding, like I said, a lot of data interpretation, a lot of statistics. But a lot of the times we also do some outputs that require some more, qualitative analysis. So I do dabble in this too, although it's not my kind of main focus of my position. And yeah, I think that's about everything. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit why I enjoy working with the Scottish Government and specifically what I like about being a statistician. I really like the variety of the work that I get. As I said, no two projects are the same, and there's loads to learn and to develop, and the Scottish Government really gives you the time and the space to learn new things. I've never been in a situation where I was told you need to produce something, but I didn't have the skills to do it. And I said, well, I don't know how to do things. And somebody said, well, figure it out. You have to do it. There's always been support. There's always been a lot of opportunity to get involved in, whether it's formal trainings and learnings from the Office of the Chief Statistician, or whether it's just something more kind of informal on a unit level. There's always been loads of support. We also do, we have the ability to rotate every few years. So that means in a few years, I'll have the chance to go into a different team. And I don't have to do that if I don't want to, but it is a great opportunity because it gives you that time to, an opportunity again to update your portfolio, to upskill, to just work on new, different, exciting topics that you never thought you might be interested in. We also get a lot of kind of emphasis and time for career development. So we're always encouraged to join different initiatives or campaigns. Something I'm doing at the moment is I'm organizing the Government Statistical Service Conference, which is happening this Wednesday. So that's something quite big that I've been involved in. But I also do the ONS Data Science Program, which is a graduate program for graduates across the UK, but also statistician and other analysts in government. And it's really, the focus is to upskill and to learn more about data science and how we can apply a lot more technical principles of data science in government to do things more efficiently and more effectively, essentially. The SG is really good. Sorry, that means the Scottish Government is really good for committing to individual career development. So even though the things I do are not directly related to my work, they might not be directly related to a publication that I'm working on, it's still something that I'm doing for the wider community. So my line manager has never said, oh, you're not allowed to get involved in these initiatives, or you don't have the time to do it. They've always been very supportive and always said, happy for you to essentially get involved in anything, as long as you can kind of prioritize and make time for both. And that really is the emphasis, that you're very trusted in this position. There's always load of trust on how you do your job, as long as you kind of get things done. And you don't get that in a lot of other positions or industries. And the other thing is really the work-life balance, the flexibility that we get. Honestly, it's probably the best that you can get across industries in government, and specifically in Scottish Government. They really make the commitment to people's lives and being as flexible and balanced as possible. So yeah, it's great. I really encourage you to apply, and if you have any questions, please, I'm here to answer anything. So there's nothing like a stupid question or a taboo question. So just ask anything.
Super. Thank you very much, Ria. You've covered a little bit of what I was going to cover, and I think you probably covered it better than I'm going to cover it later on. We've got a couple more slides to run through before we open it up to questions. But before I get to that, I see that our chief statistician, Ali McAlpine, has joined. So I'll bring Ali in at this point. If you'd like to say a few words, Ali.
Thanks, Paul, and I hope you can hear me because I've had a bit of problems with the sound, so give me a thumbs up. I've got a thumbs up there, excellent. So, well, look, very much a big thank you for joining the session here today, and I'm so glad that you're interested in applying to become a statistician. Very quickly, and Paul may have already covered this, and I think Ria's probably just covered it as well. We have a huge variety of jobs here in Scottish Government. And in the statistics profession, whether you're a communicator of statistics, whether you're really interested in the methodology and using methodology and developing statistics, or whether you like playing with data, then we'll probably have a job for you, and you'll probably be doing all three jobs at some stage as well, and learning as well how to do the job. It's a great career. I've really enjoyed being a statistician. I've been a statistician in government for 10 years now. Made my way up to chief statistician. It's the breadth of the work that we are doing is fantastic. And the part of the job that I really like doing is being able to make a difference. And actually, as chief statistician, you're less able to make a difference. Actually, when you come in at B1, B2 level at the ground, and then start to work your way up, those are the jobs where you can really make a difference in individual policy areas. And I worked on a product called the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, and it's great. You get to go out and speak to people. You get to be able to teach people how to use statistics, and that's the part of the job that's really interesting. It's really good, and you get to do some really complex statistical work. So if that sounds like it's up your street, then please do apply. We really want to hear about, and it's not about what you have done, it's how you do it as well. It's a really important part. Paul will probably talk about that in a bit, or maybe he already has done. But what we want to hear in your applications is how did you get to the point of doing some of the really important stuff that in your career so far, whether that's at university or whether it's doing some other analysis elsewhere. How did you think about doing it? And those are the things that we want to hear about. We want to be able to read your applications and think, yeah, we could take that learning and we could help you on your first step into government here, and we could really use some of that expertise in helping do the job here in government. So I'll let Paul talk you a bit more through about it, but yeah, looking forward to seeing all the applications coming in. Thanks, Paul.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Ali. So I see that there's a couple of questions. We'll get to questions in just a couple of minutes. As I say, we've got some more slides to go through before I get there. And I might answer some of the questions as we do that before we get there. So what I put in this slide is, so what Ria and Ali both described was that our statistician roles are very varied, and we have quite a lot of them. But I think ultimately they kind of come down to following a similar kind of process in the production of statistics. So that includes collecting data or acquiring data in some way. So some of you may have had some experience of conducting surveys and designing surveys, or using administrative data. So those are the kind of things that we will kind of routinely do in order to collect data. The second aspect of this is processing data. So as we've talked about, that, you know, it's this being able to handle, manage data, clean it, make sense out of it essentially, so that you can prepare it for analysis. The third step is that analyzing of the data. So exploring the patterns and trends within the data that you've got and trying to make sense of it. And then I'd say the last kind of broad thing that we do in the production of statistics is communicate what our statistics are actually saying. So that can be for a really kind of technical and specialist audience, but increasingly we're encouraging our statisticians to think about how do you communicate what could be quite difficult and complex things in really simple ways. And we've seen throughout the pandemic that there was such public interest and appetite in knowing the latest kind of figures and facts and statistics. And this is something that we definitely, you know, we have been doing, but want to try and do a little bit more of, trying to make our statistics more real to people, because a lot of what we're producing impacts, the outcomes and decisions that people will make as well. So it's really important that we can communicate what the data is saying. And I suppose with this general kind of production of statistics process, that leads us to using a range of different skills. To go back to what I said at the very start, whenever I try and explain what we do, I think people have this kind of perception that statisticians are kind of geeky numbers people. And I think to some degree we are geeky numbers people, but we're so much more than that as well. So I've just put in this kind of this little graphic just in the bottom right here, just some of the main skills that I see that statisticians use on a day-to-day basis. I think the first is kind of leadership skills. So being able to kind of lead teams in order to use data better, in order to lead policy, to help drive decision making. But that leadership kind of happens at all levels, and that's something which we're very, very much trying to encourage within the stats group within Scottish Government. So if you come in as an assistant statistician, we're very much encouraging you to take that ownership and to be able to help kind of lead and make decisions on the data, because you'll be the experts on that data, whatever role in which you come into. As I said earlier, technical skills is really key. And I think, we know that probably a lot of you on the call are kind of have good data experience or have learned that in university, are able to code. These are all the things that we're very, very much looking for and are very, very high on our list for promising people that we're looking at for assistant statistician roles. But being able to take that a step further and to provide those kind of analytical skills. So being able to kind of identify the patterns and trends, as I say, within the data, and kind of work out what's going on, to have that kind of curiosity as to, if you've got a data set, what are the main messages that you're pulling out of that. And finally, as I said earlier, being able to communicate this in a clear way is so, so important. So we're looking for our statisticians to have really good communication skills, both written and verbal communication. So what are the benefits to joining us in the stats group within SG? I think Ria and Ali have kind of covered a lot of this really well, but I'll just recap some main points. I put the salary bands for the B1 and the B2 in there. So obviously you've got the salary there, but there's so much more than just the salary. As Ria was talking about, we've got real flexibility in terms of how we work, and we really do promote a good work-life balance. At the moment, our statisticians are working in a hybrid way, so that kind of mix of working at home, but also being in the office as well. We have recently introduced a thing called the Wellbeing Hour. So that is 1 hour a week where we can use for whatever we want in order to kind of help and improve our own well-being. We've also got a very competitive pension. We've got a good holidays allowance so you start at 25 days if you join us, and that increases to 30 days after 4 years within the government. But and this is something that Ria touched on. I think within the stats group, one of the big positives is that we as a profession of statisticians, we're all essentially a community, and we all support each other, be it in kind of your individual team, your wider division, or the stats group as a whole. So we all are trying to kind of help each other, trying to support each other, and we really do try and kind of foster that kind of community feel across the profession. Ria touched on this as well. So there's a huge array of learning and development opportunities also. And that is driven by you, and your line manager will have conversations about where you can develop, and you can choose whatever you want, as opposed to some other graduate programs, for instance, that have a very set kind of structure in terms of how you progress your development. Your learning and development is your learning and development, and it's up to you to kind of decide what you need here. And as Ria mentioned, you've got that opportunity to move on to other statistician posts for your development. You can do that kind of, it's your choice as to whether you want to do that. I definitely feel like there's that mix between trying out new posts and moving into another area, but equally there is that opportunity if you really want to specialize within your current team and really get to grips with knowing the data really intimately and being able to advise policy. You can do that as well. So the other thing I'm often asked whenever it comes to recruitment is, well, what is it that you're actually looking for? So I've put on this slide kind of 3 main things that for me, I think are quite important here for an assistant statistician. The first is we're looking for data savvy people. So people that are good at handling or managing data, understanding data, and have an ability to code. Second thing is that ability to be able to figure out what data is saying, extracting the key messages from a data set, and being able to communicate that clearly. And then the third thing I would say is people that are people, so good collaborators, good team players, and really contributing to what I was talking about earlier in terms of that community feel that we have across the Scottish Government Stats Group. But with that said, we're definitely not looking for a single type of person. We are a diverse organisation within Scottish Government, and certainly within the Stats Group. We recognise that our staff have a diverse pool of skills. So you might be on this call and you might think, well, you know, I can code, but I'm maybe not the best in terms of, you know, data. That's absolutely fine. If you're, you know, if you've got, it's all about kind of understanding what you're good at, what your strengths are, and really being able to play to those strengths. So if you're really good at kind of presenting, maybe less good on the data side, that's absolutely fine. We're not looking for the same type of person, as I say. We're looking for that real diversity, because with those different perspectives, that allows us to be able to grow as a profession. So this is the point where I'm going to pause and open it up if we've got any questions about working as a Scottish Government statistician. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I'm going to have a look at the questions. We've got quite a lot of questions in here already. So I'm going to I'll go through these. So we're looking for questions about what it's like to work within the stats profession within Scottish Government. Any questions about the recruitment itself? We'll come to those a little bit later on, because I'll talk through the process. So that first question, so this is one for you, Ria, in terms of, you mentioned about rotating teams. What do you see as the next step sooner or later? Would it be taking leadership in projects or ...
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question, Abigail. I would say leadership in projects is something I already do. So at B2, you will be leading on projects. I've done a few since joining in January. So that's something you can expect. Rotating is mostly, so you stay on the same level, whether that's B1, B2, or B3, you stay on the same level, but you go into a different team. You might even go to an agency of the Scottish Government. It doesn't have to be just Scottish Government. And it's really to expand your kind of portfolio on things that you've worked on, because different teams require completely different skills. They do different outputs. So for me, progress would definitely be going up to B3, where that would be, you know, having a lot more managing responsibilities, you know, managing a team, leading on more projects, getting involved in the actual decision making of the priorities of the team, you know, who does what in the team, delegating and all that kind of stuff. But for B2, you're really looking at, when we're talking about rotation, you're really looking at keeping the same kind of level of expectation, but getting more skills and also getting to do a variety of different work, which is super exciting. Paul, if I can, while I'm on this, if I can address a few other questions that I saw. Some people were worried about whether we expect people to have a lot of coding experience. And I just want to address this because it's something that I was worried about when I joined. You know, when I was on this call 2 years ago, I asked the same question: do I have to be a strong coder to join the Scottish Government? The question is no. The answer is no. As Paul just said, we really look for a variety of people, because what you can bring, no one else can bring. So don't worry if you're not a good coder. You can definitely learn. Something I've been doing since joining is learning mainly R, because this is what we use kind of in the wider government and Scottish Government. But if you worked on, you know, projects in SPSS or SAS or even Excel, these are good gateways for learning more. You know, we need people with the aptitude for learning, not the skills. The skills you can pick up at any point as long as you want to learn it. So if right now you feel like in R you can, you know, read in a CSV and nothing else, that's absolutely fine. You don't need anything else. You will learn more as you go. And yeah, you definitely have the opportunity to learn kind of on the job.
Great, Ria. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I I saw there were some questions around that. So definitely, we've got tons of questions here. This is excellent. I shall keep going. We might not be able to get through all of them, but what I think we'll try and do is try and answer as many as we can. And I'll go to about 1:15 and then go through the rest of our presentation. If there's any questions that we don't pick up on, maybe if it's okay, if Stephen's still about, maybe we can provide some text responses to some of the questions, if that's all right. Okay, so what is the difference between a B1 and a B2 statistician? It's a good question because obviously we're recruiting both at the same time. So we do see B1 as kind of as an entry level. B2 is just kind of developing that role with just a little bit more kind of experience. So if you look, well, we'll get to this in a minute in terms of the kind of the eligibility criteria. Generally, we kind of say, B2 having a little bit of experience elsewhere, be it within government or out with government. B1 is generally a little bit more for entry level, but essentially the kind of the difference between the roles, I mean, there are quite similar roles, but whenever you get to B2, it's just being able to kind of just kind of develop the role a little bit more. So that's that. I don't know if you've got anything else, either Ria or Ali, maybe anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would just say that it really depends on the team, but mostly B2 would be leading on projects and also doing a lot of the write-up and creating visuals for data. So think about communicating the data rather than just producing the raw figures. If you're a B1, then there would be a lot more technical support. There will be a lot more to do with quality assurance, whether the people on the team who have worked on this data before you have gone through all the proper procedures and have got to the numbers that they need, that kind of things. But I think Paul covered that in very good detail.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've had quite a few questions about coding languages and programs and software that we use. So I can answer a little bit of that, and then I'll throw it open if Ria has anything further to add here. So the stats group within Scottish Government, generally we work in either a program called SAS or a program called R, but there is absolute flexibility to be able to use, if you've got skills in Python, there is facility to use things like Python, but a lot of this is kind of lining with what existing teams already use. I will say, as someone that, so I had experience in university in SPSS and from work in SPSS, and kind of came in and was then using SAS and R, but being able to, I kind of think if you've got the skills to be able to learn one type of software or one kind of programming language, I generally find that our statisticians are very, very good at kind of picking up new ones. And as Ria's already said, if you don't have experience of this directly, or if you don't have training in it, there is a lot of opportunities to be able to kind of get some of that as soon as you start. Anything further to add on that, Ria or Ali?
Again, you've covered that very well. Oh, sorry, Ali, when you go.
No, you carry on, Ria.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, reiterate what Paul has already said about if you already have a skill in something and you would like to continue using it, there probably will be scope for you to do it, even if, if you're a really good coder in Python, but your team really doesn't code in Python. If you came into the team and said, listen, I think I've got some good ideas for how we can make this work, then you will be allowed to do this. A lot of the time, I said we use R. This is because it's open source and it's very, well, it's not intuitive, but it's, out there. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that even if there's one preferred language, doesn't mean that you will be required to only do this and nothing else. And even if you don't have the skills in this language, there will be loads of opportunity to do some career development. There was a question that I saw about whether we have any learning and development opportunities, and yes, we have loads. For example, in R, I just did an internal course that was on R, but I also did a course from the University of Edinburgh that was funded by the University of Edinburgh. And I did that during my working hours as part of my kind of continuing learning and development on the job. So there's loads of opportunities for you to do this. And if you wanted, if you identified something like a workshop or a training resource, whatever it is, that's not internal and you wanted to go to it, your line manager will most likely say yes. So definitely loads of room for learning and development.
Ria, thanks for that. I'll just move on. I've got a question here from James, which I would like to ask Ali. So his question is, what are some of the upcoming projects that successful applicants could be working on? What can you tell us about that?
Well, where do I start? We have got a lot of projects going on at the moment. Paul's talked about using SAS as one of the programming languages. We're moving more and more to using R because that's what we see graduates coming out of university. But one of the interesting projects that we're encouraging across the whole stats community is the use of reproducible analytical pipelines. So that's very much about coding for and being able to publish the code behind all our statistics, be very open and transparent about our statistics. And there's a lot of work going on at the moment to develop RAPs as well. So I would have a little look online. I think there's a web page on the government website about reproducible analytical pipelines. That's going to be a big focus for us in the near future. There's other projects as well, so many other projects looking at developing new statistics, developing data science capability and things like that. It very much depends on the analytical area that you would end up working within, and many of them will have different priorities. So for example, in RESAS, which is our environmental area, they're very much looking at being able to incorporate satellite imagery into the statistics. Health, they're very much looking at data pipelines and be able to publish management information very quickly. So there's a whole range of different projects. If I were to name them all, I think I would be here for the rest of the day.
Thank you for that, Ali. And just another question here, which I'm seeing, you talked earlier about there's roles, people that are interested in methodology. Can you elaborate a little bit more on those roles?
Certainly. I mean, there's, well, so you might end up working for National Records of Scotland. National Records of Scotland are the people who published the census earlier this year, just in the autumn there. A fantastic piece of work, actually. Many of you all have heard in the news how, you know, the not as many people responded to the census as we wanted to. So we had to think about the methodology that went in to account for everybody, because a census does need to count everybody in the population. So there was a lot of methodology discussions, a lot of methodology development there, using administrative data to supplement the information that we'd collected through the census. So that's one area where there's a lot of methodology jobs, methodology related jobs. But you might, as I said, I've just mentioned the satellites. You might be working to develop new methodology in machine learning techniques, or a whole host of other new statistics that are coming in. And we are always looking to update the statistics that we publish using new administrative data, using surveys, and that always requires some methodology and a lot of thought around about that. So what we are seeing quite often is that people coming out of university have got new ways, new techniques, thinking about statistics in different ways. We'd be looking for you to be bringing that experience and being part of the conversation of developing methodology for some big statistical projects. So I don't know if that quite answers the question. I think you wanted me to elaborate a bit more. I could go into specifics on machine learning techniques, but maybe that gives you a bit of a range of some of the things that we're thinking about.
Okay, Ali, thank you very much for that. We probably have time for just one more question here. I'm just trying to find the. There was a question I was yes. So it was Laurie's question. It's about the initial orientation and training in terms of what's required, what's available, and the duration. So we have a group within within the stats group called the induction group. So that kind of takes any new starts through. It's a program which lasts about a year. There's kind of events every couple of months. It's talking through for those that maybe have no background at all about what it's like working in the stats group within Scottish Government. So kind of like takes you through kind of different aspects of what we do, and allows you to be able to start to build up those networks pretty much from day one in terms of the other people that are starting at the same time as you. So whenever we kind of get through this round of recruitment, and whenever you're in post, probably be looking at towards the kind of the late spring or summer of next year, where that induction group will start to kick in, and the successful candidates from this round will be able to will be able to avail of that. So as I said, I will put a pause there because we can't get through all of the questions within the time. But we'll endeavour to try and answer all the remaining questions that we don't in the course of this, either through the Q&A in the background, or we'll try and do that separately and publish that if that's all right. So what I shall do is I shall move on. Just a big thanks to Ray and a big thanks to Ali for saying a few words and answering questions. So thank you to both. Right. So there were a couple of questions in the chat about the assessment centre process. So I'm going to hopefully answer a lot of those questions now. So this is our recruitment process. This is just a brief chart that shows how it works. So you start by completing the application form. So as Stephen said at the very start, applications are due next Monday, 13th of November. First thing that happens is that there's eligibility criteria. I'll talk about that in a sec. If you pass the eligibility criteria, then then you'll move to the next stage of the process. You'll go through a different route if you're a member of the government statistics group or not. So those that are a member of the government stats group, their application will be sifted if you pass the eligibility criteria. If you're not a member of the government stats group, you need to set what we call the online knowledge test. That is a requirement for what we talk about statistics badging through the government stats group. I'll talk a little bit about what the online knowledge test entails in a moment. If you're successful in that, and if you pass the SIFT, then you're invited to the online assessment centre. I'll talk about that in a moment as well. But that's the broad kind of outline of the process. So we had a couple of questions in the chat about B1 or B2. So we're recruiting the two grades, two separate applications here. One is for at B1 level and one is at B2 level. So as we were saying, B1 is kind of at an undergraduate level, B2 potentially with a little bit more relevant experience. If you're not sure, apply for both grades and the panel will decide whatever level that you pass at. But it is important to say that you're only assessed at what you apply for. So if you apply for the B2 but not the B1 and are not successful, your application won't be considered at the B1 unless you've also applied for the B1. And note as well that there's different essential criteria that you need to complete as part of your application for the B1 and the B2 levels. So I'll talk you through the difference in those in a sec. So here's just an outline in terms of timetable about what we're going to be doing. So the advert closes next Monday. We'll do those eligibility checks the following week. And then those that pass that will be invited to that knowledge test towards the end of this month. So you'll be doing that as an online thing in your own time. We'll leave about a week to do that. At this point, then, the successful applications are sifted. So that will be done in December. And the aim is that before Christmas, you'll find out whether or not you're proceeding to assessment centre or not. So I don't know whether it's a good thing or it's a bad thing, but you would have Christmas period and the festive period to prepare for your interviews, which would be in January into the start of February. We've asked in the application if there's any dates during that window in January and Feb that you're unavailable. So we're going to try and be as flexible as we possibly can throughout this. If there's any shift or any slippage in the timescale, we'll endeavour to communicate with you via the iCIMS portal on that. And all being well, we will confirm the assessment results mid to end of February. Okay, we'll start with the application form. So as I said, iCIMS is the platform that we use for that. One thing that is important to note is that you're going to be asked to upload a CV in order to progress your application. So the CV is a requirement of the system, but we don't use it as part of the stats process. So other Scottish Government posts might use the CV. So please be aware of that, whatever you're uploading here. But just to say, we don't necessarily expect that applicants will upload a fully up-to-date CV for the competition. We've seen some instances of kind of blank documents and things like that being uploaded. That's absolutely fine if you do that. But if you do choose to upload the CV, it will not be looked at the recruitment panel. We will only look at the answers to your essential criteria here. So it won't have any impact on the marking of the application. So bear that in mind. I don't want you to go through any extra work in terms of putting your application together. So I've talked through the, I mentioned the eligibility criteria, and I shall talk you through that now. There's 3 different routes which determine whether your eligibility to proceed through to the main part of the recruitment process. The first is the GSG membership, which I briefly spoke about earlier. So for that, you need to provide evidence that you've passed the statistics recruitment campaign that covers the elements for government statistics group badging. So if there's any existing B1 statisticians that are on the call, you will have passed, you are a member of the government stats group, so you would be eligible via that route. If you're not, you can your eligibility can be through your qualifications or through your experience. So irrespective of what route you're going down, you need a minimum 2 undergrad degree or a master's degree or a PhD. If you're applying as through your qualifications, you need to demonstrate how those qualifications contain formal training on stats or data. If you're applying through experience, you need to demonstrate some experience in a stats or data related field in addition to your degree. So what we say is that for the B2, we're looking for a year's experience in a stats or data related field. If you're applying as B1, just some experience will do. We're not putting a definite time limit on that. So in this part of the application form, I would stress just to be brief in terms of what you're kind of providing here. So if you're a GSG member, say that you're a GSG member, send Wendy, who is in charge of analytical resourcing, an email to say, you know, when as that evidence that you've passed a GSG badged recruitment campaign. In that box, if you're applying through qualifications, tell us what your degree is in, tell us the formal training that you've done on stats or data. And if you're applying through experience, tell us about your degree, tell us about your experience. So this is just to get to the next stage. So we don't need tons of detail here, but just enough to meet the criteria. So as I said, the next part of the campaign is the knowledge test. So this is a multiple choice test. It's going to be 45 minutes in total. And in those 45 minutes, you've got 25 questions. Those questions test about basic stat skills and numeracy. So the way that it works is that you get 3 marks if you've got a correct answer. You get a mark deducted for an incorrect answer. You don't get any marks if you leave it blank. So you're under no obligation to complete absolutely every single question. What you're aiming for is a score of 26 out of the full 75, which is the maximum. So that is the online knowledge test. As I said, you'll be doing that you'll be sent a link to that, and you'll be doing that in your own time. And then if you're successful through that, your application will be sifted in accordance with the essential criteria in the ad. So on this slide, I've put up the essential criteria for both B1 and B2 side by side. They do relate to kind of similar type of areas in which we're trying to get at here. So for those that ask questions about what's the difference between a B1 and a B2, the difference in the essential criteria might give you some kind of insight into those differences. So for the essential criteria, what you need to do is you need to give us an answer of a strict maximum of 300 words about how you meet each. I get asked quite a lot in terms of, should I use something from university, or, would I be penalized if I use examples from the same job or whatever? What I always say to people is use your best example for how you meet the essential criteria. Don't feel too concerned if it's maybe coming from, from the same role, or if it's all coming from university. I would say just use your best example that you've got. What we would recommend is using what's called the STAR approach. So those that have maybe been applying for roles will be familiar with the STAR approach, because we also recommend that you use it for the interview as well. So the STAR approach breaks your answer down into the following categories. So we start with the situation. So that's giving us a brief background as to the specific examples of where you've demonstrated the essential criterion. You've got 300 words, so you don't have a lot of words to use here. So an emphasis on keeping that situation brief. The next part is the task. So what is your role, and what did you have to do? And I remember being told once that what can be really, really effective in a STAR answer is in the task we identify what an issue is that you've overcome. And having kind of been on kind of interview panels and having seen essential criteria answers, I definitely think it really does stand out if you can demonstrate what the issue is that you've been able to overcome. The action is the next part. So this is about what you did, but more importantly, how did you do it? You're probably going to spend the most number of words on the action part, because this is your opportunity to really sell yourself. In this part, it's what skills did you use? You want to show off your skills at this point, how you've been able to make a difference, how you've kind of outlined, your thinking and your thought process throughout this. So what I would say is the big thing that I would see where people fall down on is that they kind of talk more about the actual work that they did and less about how they did it. So always think every sentence that you're typing here, how are you showcasing yourself and selling your skills? The next part is the results. So what did you achieve, and what were the results of what you did? And what can be quite nice is just some reflection about what you've learned from the situation, maybe what you might do differently, or what you would do again if you were faced with a similar scenario. So that's the essential criteria. You've got 300 words to answer across each of the 4 essential criteria. I definitely recommend getting feedback on your application before you submit as well. And preferably if it's someone that doesn't really know maybe the examples that you're referring to, just because if you give it to someone that has maybe been involved in a similar situation, they could perhaps be too close to it. So if you're able to get feedback from someone else, that's really, really helpful. And as I said, the STAR approach equally applies to the competency-based interview. So what we'll do for those that have gone through that and they've passed the test and their application is sifted, we will score it on a scale, or we'll score it either a 0 if it doesn't meet the requirements, 1 if it partially meets, and 2 if it fully meets the requirements. A score of 0 in any of the essential criteria answers will automatically mean that you're not invited to assessment. And we will invite the top scoring candidates to proceed to assessment centre. So that's based on the number of days of interviewing that we've got, how many that we'll be able to invite through. Disability confident candidates can get an interview as long as they've scored a 1 in each of the essential criteria. The last thing to say is that the SIFT is going to be anonymous. So the sifters won't have any reference to the rest of your application or your CV if you put in a CV, or your academic history or your work background. So just bear that in mind, that the sifters are only going to be looking at what you put in those boxes, and that's it. So if you're successful for the interview, you're going to receive an information pack about what to expect. The interview tests the competencies based on the Scottish Government Skills for Success competency framework, but also the Government Statistics Group framework as well. And we test 3 competencies on each. The assessment centre itself is going to be about an hour and 40 minutes. So there's 2 broad components. There's an oral briefing exercise, which you will prepare prior to the interview, and you will present whenever you get to the interview. And then you will have the competency-based interview after that. There is an opportunity to get in touch if you require reasonable adjustments. That might be some extra time. But one of the adjustments which we've extended out to all candidates is to provide the lead competency-based interview questions in advance to candidates. So that allows you to be able to prepare your answers a little bit better. But I'll talk through both aspects of the assessment centre, starting with the oral briefing exercise. So what will happen is that you'll be invited onto a Microsoft Teams call, because we're doing this all remotely, and you'll be given access to tables of statistics on a topic, and you'll be reviewing that for 30 minutes. So what we're going to ask you to do is present the key findings to us or to the panel via Microsoft Teams. What we're trying to do with this is testing your ability to kind of understand what the tables are saying and draw out the key messages and explain that back to us in a very clear and simple way. What we'd recommend here is focus on what is the important headline findings here. You know, what's the overall picture? What are the trends? Maybe if you've got some time, what are the differences between the different groups? All of this is about trying to build a story about what's said in the tables, rather than just saying a lot of numbers to the panel. As part of the oral briefing, you will also be asked to produce a chart, and so you'll be talking us through that chart as well as we go through the oral briefing exercise. The second part of the assessment is the competency-based interview. So you're going to be asked 6 questions, 1 on each competency. So the questions are designed to focus on the specific examples where you've demonstrated those skills. So quite often, and you might be familiar with this through other recruitment that you might have been through, the questions will kind of start with, tell me about a time when you did whatever. STAR approach that I talked about earlier is a really, really good way to structure your answers here, as well as through the essential criteria answers. So using that STAR approach will just be able to kind of showcase yourself in the best way. So interviewers will ask you some follow-up questions. So don't feel as though you've done anything wrong by doing that. You know, if an interviewer has to ask some follow-up questions, don't feel like that's any reflection on your answer. What we've been saying to candidates now by receiving the questions in advance is trying to, if you can plan answers in around the 5-minute mark, that allows our interviewers to have a conversation with you through the follow-up questions. And all of that is just trying to get more out of you and just trying to get the best out of you, because our interviewers aren't there to trip you up. We really, really do want you to do well and be successful. So I'll just run through some final kind of hints and tips, and then we'll open it up for questions. So What I would say is for the assessment, if you get to that point, just be yourself. As we said earlier, we are looking for real diversity across the stats group. So we're definitely not looking for one type of person. Just play to your strengths is what I would recommend. Being really clear with your examples and focusing on getting your skills across is another absolute key point here. What's your time on the questions? As I said, in and around the 5-minute mark for each answer. That's not a lot of time, so try not to spend too much time giving kind of background or contextual detail that isn't selling you. Often we do see candidates that are kind of spending too much time giving us the background. Your evidence can come from anywhere, but try and tie the skills into those needed in the work environment. You definitely won't be penalised if it is not from the work context. And I've seen some really, really good examples very recently of where people have brought experience from elsewhere and have really, really made it apply in an interview setting. We do recommend to not use the same example over and over, but I understand, if people have, if the main bulk of their experience that they're trying to bring is, going through a PhD or going through, a specific job role, what I would recommend is really try and frame your example in different ways every time, because you want to try and kind of tell that story of what you've done. So you don't need to kind of set the scene in quite the same way, depending on what the question is. There's no issue at all of repeating examples from your application form, because chances are the panel won't have seen that. As I said, the panel want you to do well. So if you need anything repeated, that's fine. And the panel will be kind of concentrating on capturing everything that you're saying. So don't feel put off by that. You can use notes as a reminder as well, but we suggest to not read them verbatim. Rather, kind of having some bullet points to kind of talk around is what we find is best as interviewers, because it allows us to be able to have that discussion with you about your experience. And that just enables the interviewer to get so much more out of a candidate. Panel's experienced, no tricks here. We just want you to do well. I don't feel, I know I've been in this position a few times before where something hasn't gone right, or I forgot to say something, or, and I've just gone to bits in the interview off the back of that. But try not to worry if something like that happens. Just deal with it, move on, and then just focus on the rest of the interview, because definitely all is not lost. And as I said earlier, get a mock interview from someone and get feedback as to how you come across, because sometimes it doesn't always, what you think is maybe a good example maybe requires a little bit more explanation to someone without that background. So last thing to say here is what is going to happen. So those that pass will be offered posts. So we have a whole range of posts that we're recruiting for here at the B1 level and the B2 level. I don't have an exact number, because a lot of that is going to depend on other campaigns that we've recently concluded, just to see exactly where we're sitting. But there's a high number of posts which we're recruiting for at the minute. We will then allocate you to a specific post. So that's going to depend on a number of different things. It's going to depend on what you say in the interview, what skills that you showcase, and how that matches with what's in the skills required for the role. You will be able to kind of get your own preferences in here as well. So we'll be able to try and use all of this to help make the best decisions. But please note, we don't go solely on individual preferences, because it just becomes very hard to kind of allocate people exactly what they want at all times. If we have more people that have passed than we have vacant posts, we'll keep a reserve list. And as vacant posts come up, we'll offer those off the reserve list. And that's done in a merit order. So those that score, as I said, those that score the highest will be offered posts first initially. If you pass or if you don't pass, we recommend candidates to get some feedback, because it's always useful for whenever you go for an interview next time around. if you don't pass, we're hoping. Well, I should have put a B1 or B2 board next year. I didn't change that from the slide. We're hoping to run another recruitment campaign next time around, but that will all depend on budgets and vacancies. So hopefully it will be next year, but we can't guarantee that. And consider your feedback and work on ways to improve as well. So that is my presentation done. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to answer some outstanding questions about the recruitment process.
So, Paul, I think while you've been talking, Wendy, Ria, and myself have been trying to answer quite a lot of the questions. So we've gone through quite a few of them. Please do let us know if they haven't been answered. Thanks, Paul.
That's really excellent. Thank you very much. It's really, really great to see such a high level of interest in this, because I'm seeing 50 questions have been answered. So thanks everyone for your questions. I shall run through. I'll just, in the remaining 20 minutes here, we'll just try and answer as many questions as we can. So I'm going to start with some of those early questions. Will there be a copy of the PowerPoint slides that we can download? Yes, the plan is to upload them on the SG website. So there will be a link to that from the, I'll need to sort this with Stephen, but yes, there will be a link from the Data Lab website. So one way or another, the PowerPoint slides will be available. Alf had a question about elaborating more on technical skills. I think that we have answered that question. Technical skills kind of relating to the kind of coding, data management, and data handling. So I think we've answered that, but Alf, do let me know if there's any further detail that you would like. The question around role being eligible for visa sponsorship, I think that has already been answered as well. And we've answered that question around methodology. So, sorry. So we've got a question. Sorry, it just keeps resetting as new questions come in. So we've got a question is, I don't fully understand what is needed to explain the eligibility criteria 3. Are a few sentences explaining experience enough? Yes. So this is for the eligibility criteria if you're going through experience. Tell us a little bit about what you've done. Tell us what the role entailed, how you use data, how you use statistics. We don't need reams and reams and reams of information because we don't refer to this again, but it's only just to get you through to the next stage. So, I mean, if in doubt, provide a little bit more, but we don't need lots of information in order to pass the eligibility criteria. The next question is, are all 6 GSG and skills for success competencies assessed in the application form? So no, they're not. The application form attests the essential criteria, which we see as key for the role. So that's separate from the skills for success and government stats group competencies. There's a question here from Paige. Are there any example or sample questions which for the online knowledge test that we can look at? Or will there be example questions at the start of the online knowledge test? That is, so we're not planning to issue any example questions beforehand, but to give kind of a flavor of what we're kind of looking for here, you know, we're looking at kind of being able to kind of questions around kind of being able to calculate percentage change, questions about kind of what statistical techniques you might use, questions around kind of means, mode, medians, what average might be appropriate, assumptions underlying statistical techniques, and some more kind of, I suppose, kind of numeracy and mathematical based questions. So I hope that answers your question. How many vacancies are there this year? That's a good question. I don't have.
Well, I've already answered that question elsewhere, and I think the important thing that I would say is that we've got a number of vacancies, hence the reason why we're doing a recruitment campaign at the moment, and we're still trying to nail down that number. But the important thing is that we're not trying to just fill a quota here. We're looking for candidates with the right standard. So don't worry about whether we're trying to fill a quota or anything like that. There are a number of vacancies, and I think it would be fair to say if you're successful through the application and through the interview stage, then we will be offering you a job at some point very soon after that.
Lovely. Thanks, Ali. For the remote assessment centre, are all questions and data sets given in advance? So only the questions for the competency, the lead questions for the competency-based interview will be given in advance. The oral briefing exercise, that none of that material will be given in advance. So it's only just the lead questions for the competency-based interview. Sorry, just bear with me as I find the next question.
Paul, while you're doing that one, Steve Crawford has asked to all of the panel, what's your favourite part of your job? I'd just like to answer that.
Well, that's a good question.
No day is the same as the best part of my job. I absolutely love it. And the other bit that I really enjoy as well is when you produce some statistics and you present that to people, and you see an audience and the light bulb goes on and they find they've learned something new. Those are the two things that I really like. Ria, I don't know whether you want to add something in there as well, because you're at the coalface more than I am these days.
Yeah, definitely. I think you put it very well. They're saying that we really do produce statistics for the public. That's the core of our job, and I think this is my favorite aspect of the job, is knowing that any day I come to work, it's, I'm doing something for somebody else. I'm helping the community, and it's not like working in a private company where my whole purpose would be to just grow numbers and not anything else. I do love the fact that any work I produce will be used by the community, the public, in some way or another. And we answer to those very interesting and also very important questions that really affect all of us.
Thank you. And Paul, I just saw the opposite question. What part of the job do I least like? Ria, you can choose your part, but I'll go first, and I'll say there's not enough hours in the day. I wish I had more hours because there's so much that we could be doing.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything I can pinpoint and say, oh, I really don't like this part of the job. Maybe I haven't got to that part yet. But yeah, I think, for some people, for example, there would be too much liaising with colleagues or other departments, and that might be something they don't enjoy. But I'm very extroverted. Obviously, I like public speaking. I'm here on this call today, so I really don't mind talking to new people and meeting new people. So that's something that I really love. But I think there might be some people who say, oh, actually, I don't like the aspect of having to put my face out there and speak to a bunch of different people every day.
Thank you. And Paul, I'll take one more question and I'll hand back over to you, but I think I'm probably in the best place to answer this one, which is, it seems very orientated towards university graduates. Perhaps you could comment a bit more for mature applicants. Well, for your information, whoever's asked that question, this is a second career for me. I used to be a chef, not a very good one. Poundland Gordon Ramsay at best. And I came out of university as a mature student. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this job is that I went back to university. I studied statistics and economics, and then got a job, eventually came into government. And one of the things that we really do value, and I value as well, is that I have experience of a very different role, but there are some of the same things that I did in those roles, like managing people, like planning. Those are still important in your role in government as well. So if you're coming in as a mature student, yeah, absolutely, we want to hear from you as well. And there are plenty of opportunities for you to bring that experience into government as well. And we do value that. Thanks, Paul.
Great, thank you, Ali. We've got just a couple more questions. So one from Emily saying, are there particular statistical tests that would be preferable to be demonstrated in the application process? I wouldn't say that there's anything in particular. As I said earlier, play to your strengths on this. So if you have good experience in terms of like regression or t-tests or ANOVAs, or equally if you have good experience with coding and machine learning, things like that, all of this is equally valid. So there's not a kind of a specific thing that we lean towards more than others. As I said, play to your strengths is what I would recommend on that in terms of the application process. Is there somewhere we can find out about what topics will be tested on? I'm not sure if that's referring to the online test or not. But if it is, I've answered that. I've answered the online test earlier. In terms of other topics that you'll be tested on, so you get the questions in advance, the competency-based interviews, and as I said, yeah, the oral briefing is all about being able to extract the main messages from data tables. So not anything that you would need to kind of specifically prepare for in advance on that. Does the application form need to be completed in one sitting, or can you go back to it after partially completing it? That's a good question, because I actually don't know the answer to that, because I've not filled in the application form. I think you can go back to it after you partially completed it, but someone can maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I'll just come in on this because I just finished my B3 application a few months ago. And I do believe you can finish your application in a few settings, so you don't have to do it all at once. But I always find that a good motivator, and also just as a backup, to write up your answers somewhere else. So maybe Google Docs or OneNote or whatever, write up all of your answers there, and only then start your application live and whatever website you're accessing, just because you never know what happens, technology fails. So it's good to have this backup and only start the application once you're ready and have all of your answers already down.
Wendy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to remind people that once they get to the end of the application, it does submit. It doesn't give a warning. So make sure that you're content as you're moving through the pages. Once you're at the end, I've heard people kind of saying that you can't then go back and adjust things.
Thank you.
Just be careful on that.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks, Ria, for that. So got another question here. After passing the assessment centre in February, how long till the successful candidates can assume the role? So a lot of that is going to be dependent on your own circumstances, as well as the onboarding process as well. So all I can say is that from our side, we do try and get through it as quickly as we possibly can. But some of those timescales are kind of out with our control and through the kind of the HR onboarding process. But we will seek to try and minimize the amount of time taken there. Callum's question: do you need to choose which method you're eligible through? I did some work in my previous job, but I also had some stats modules in my undergrad. I'm not sure if either are enough on their own. What I'd recommend is just put all of that down, and we'll make kind of a judgment call as to whether cumulatively that is enough. But it sounds to me like that is, if you've done some stats modules in your undergrad, it does sound like that is going to be more than sufficient to get through the eligibility criteria. Question here about how much time in advance will the lead competency questions be provided? So we will seek to provide the competency questions pretty much as soon as possible after you've been notified. So the intention definitely will be, if we are going out pre-Christmas to let you know if you're through to interview, the intention will be that you will have those questions pre-Christmas as well. So you will have that time to prepare. I don't know whether that would ruin your Christmas or not. I don't know, but at least you've got the option to kind of prepare or not. And we managed to get through all these questions, which I'm really amazed by.
Paul, there's
last
one more
favorite
project.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something? I've got a good one I was going to talk about. But
no, go for it, Ali.
So one project that I was involved in, I've talked about it a little bit already, is that we decided to look at satellite images, and it was a really interesting one because we had seen a demonstration in England where they use satellite images, actual visible light images, but also radar images to estimate what crops are being growing across England. And I looked at that and I thought, that would be interesting. Can we do that in Scotland? Well, if you look above your head, well, maybe not today. I can see blue skies, but mostly we've got clouds above our head. So the challenge for us was, could we do the same thing, but just with radar images? And what the satellites do is they look at the growth profile within a field, and then you can estimate what, you can predict what crop was growing in that field. And the real life impact is that we normally go out and ask farmers while they're trying to harvest their crop, what crops they are growing. And the real life impact of that is that if we're in the final stages of getting that project through, that we might not need to have to ask farmers when they're really busy what crops we're growing, because we'll be able to look at the satellites and be able to tell that. And that was a really interesting one, because we started using machine learning algorithms and random forest classifications, looking at neural networks and things like that. So a really exciting project, and that one was a great one that I really enjoyed doing.
Thanks, Ali. Ria, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I do. But before that, I just wanted to say how interesting was all of this, Ali. I am so jealous of all that work. I really wish I was involved in this. Hopefully in my next rotation, maybe. But yeah, I was going to give an example of the first project that I ever led on in this team, which was on the attitudes of young people towards violence against women and girls, and that was across secondary schools in Scotland, and it was a very interesting but also grim project, as you could imagine. But at the end, after finishing, it got picked up by the media, and there was a big a big article in the STV about it. So that was kind of picked up on by some smaller outlets after, and all that commotion started a big conversation in schools, whether there's something else that we could be doing about how to tackle all these issues with violence against women and girls, specifically in young people, and how we can really change these attitudes. So it was a very big thing to be, to have happened in my kind of first few months of being in the team. But it really showed me how amazing it could be to do some work that actually has real life impact and help people. So yeah, that was a good one.
Great.
And I would just add, well, Paul, that through the pandemic as well, through the COVID pandemic, statisticians were really at the forefront of providing evidence, helping to make decisions to save lives and stop people from dying from COVID-19. So there's been a lot of recent examples where statisticians have had a real impact. And what we're trying to do now is make sure that that impact carries on. And I think that there's a more emphasis now within government on the need for statistics as well, and hence the reason why we need you guys to all apply.
Yeah, I mean that very much overlaps onto my answer to this question as well. I think that so we've seen with COVID-19, cost of living crisis, Ukrainian resettlement, work that statisticians are doing on the ground is having a real impact in terms of the kind of the decisions that are being made here. And I think in terms of, for me, one of the most rewarding things that I've had in my role, albeit in a more centralized role now and less involved, like similar to Ali, less involved in the kind of the direct analytical work. I think the most rewarding thing for me is, so my team had produced some quite comprehensive publications guidance, and really thinking about how we get our messages out there, and really thinking about our audience that we're trying to convey our statistics to, and really trying to pitch things at the right level so we can get some cut through. And just seeing across some of those kind of big societal emergencies how we've been able to kind of really improve our skills in communication in order to get that cut through and to really make a difference has been something that I found extremely rewarding personally. Okay, we've got 2 minutes left and 2 questions, so I'll do these really, really quickly and then we'll need to wrap up. So the question is, what is the main difference between the B1 and B2 roles and the B3 role? So I would say that the B3 senior assistant statistician role is much more focused about kind of leading teams and starting that kind of to lead that team towards the best use of data. So you know, a little bit more involved in the kind of the strategic and a bigger picture kind of thinking here. Question from Claire. As a MSc data science student, I'm very interested in this role and would want to use upskilling for the greater good. Would love placement in the Scottish Government. Shame I can't apply now. Thank you for an informative presentation today. Thank you for that. Shona's question, and I think we'll make this the very last question. Do you get a choice of what topic area or statistics that you work with? So as I said earlier, that your placements are kind of determined, you know, we need to kind of consider all of this together. So that will relate to your skills, skills of the post, business needs, but your preferences do form part of that. But just please be aware that you might, you know, what you might want to do, you know, your kind of like top preference, you might not get. So, but what I would say is any stats role that I've been in, I haven't got my top preference, but I have loved every single role because I've just was able to make it my own with the skills that I had and just lean it in a certain direction. So in my career, I've worked on people census within schools and within energy statistics before that. And I definitely say I couldn't have wished for better roles, even though I maybe didn't see it at the time. So I think that is it. I see there's some extra comments. There's one question here which I will deal with, and then we're done. So as a temporary B1 assistant statistician, do I qualify as a GSG member? Unfortunately, you don't. So you need to pass a full GSG campaign in order to apply as a badged GSG statistician. And that's us done. I'll pass over to Stephen.
Thank you very much, Paul, Ali, and Ria. I think that's been, for everybody who's interested, super informative, and hopefully you'll see lots of applications coming through. Loads of thank yous coming through now as well. For people who were asking about the recording, I will try and get it uploaded to the Data Labs YouTube channel this afternoon. If it's not this afternoon, it'll be up as first thing tomorrow morning. And I'll email everybody who has registered for this session, so you'll get that straight into your inbox. But yeah, thanks again for everybody who came along and for yourselves for speaking.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. The pleasure's been all ours. I hope everyone that has been at the presentation has enjoyed it. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Cheers.
And good luck.
Bye-bye.
Good luck. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, good luck to everyone. Bye.